In the study of geopolitics as an academic field, there are serious theoretical frameworks that enable us to understand the choices and the actions of those acting in the name of the state and the subsequent state behavior in the ensuing global politics that is largely described as anarchical for those who are leaning towards the realist perspective. One such theory is the Heartland Theory by Halford Mackinder. The Heartland Theory by Halford Mackinder was presented by him in 1904 when he presented his seminal paper on the geographical pivot of history. So, what does the Heartland Theory explain, and how can we use its key assumptions to explain state behavior and geopolitics in the modern time? The Heartland Theory was written by Halford Mackinder, who was the British geographer and politician. He was presenting this theory at a time when the British naval power was at the peak. And at this particular time also, the industrial activities had gained momentum, and there was massive expansion of railway across the Eurasia. And because of that, there was also the rising competition between Germany and Russia. And therefore, he wrote this theory in response to the early theories that had been presented by scholars such as Alfred Thayer Mahan, who had projected that those who conquer the sea and those who rule the sea waves had actually the power to control the world. And Halford Mackinder is writing this theory to shift the attention of British policy makers and statesmen from not only focusing on the naval power, but also rethinking their strategy as far as the land power is. Consequently, Halford Mackinder wrote the Heartland Theory to warn the British about the rising strength of the continental powers, and also to explain how railways are strengthening the inland powers, and also to counter the belief that those who rule the sea waves had the potential to conquer the world, and also to prevent a single power from dominating Eastern Europe, which Halford Mackinder felt to be the nerve center as far as the control of the world politics is concerned. And in this theory, Halford Mackinder assumed that geography determines and influences the political power. He also viewed the world as a closed system with no new territories to conquer, and therefore, as a closed system with no new territories to conquer, one can only better on that which they have as they struggle to gain access and control over that which they feel is strategic and which can add value to their activities. And that the Eurasia heartland was also rich in resources, and these resources are vital for economic growth. And because of the inaccessibility of this area, then naval invasion was almost impossible. And therefore, he observed that land-based military mobility, that is through the railways, can actually surpass the power of the naval states, and therefore trying to encourage Britain that apart from focusing on the naval power, there was a need of focusing on the land power, based on the fear that what if Germany expands to the east and maybe at some point there is a partnership between Germany and Russia. He didn't want British to be left behind. And therefore, in writing this theory, Halford Mackinder presented one major thesis that is associated with this theory. And that is, who rules Eastern Europe commands the heartland. He who commands the heartland commands the world island. He who commands the world island commands the world. With this, Halford Mackinder concluded that those who control the heartland will eventually control the world island. And once you have controlled the world island, then you are able to project power. In the thinking of Halford Mackinder, the heartland was strategically located, it was almost inaccessible and therefore difficult to conquer. And once you access the heartland, then you are able to project your power to the world island. And once you control the world island, then you are now able to project power to the rest of the world. In this view, Mackinder must have been informed by the fact that the heartland and the world island had massive resources. These areas were strategically located, and from those benefits and advantages, and then you double the fact that these areas were inaccessible and therefore difficult to conquer, made Mackinder think of the strategic nature of East Europe as far as global politics is concerned. So how can we use the Heartland Theory to explain the current geopolitics as far as the modern world is concerned? The application of the Heartland Theory in explaining state behavior can be traced in the containment of continental powers, where Britain sought to prevent any power from dominating Eastern Europe. And also after the Second World War, the United States of America also adopted the same strategy of trying to contain the Soviet Union. And the goal here was to prevent any single state from controlling the Eurasia because of its strategic value. Also, in the years that we have seen after the Second World War, NATO has continued to expand eastward. And because of that expansion, Russia has remained worried on the possibility of NATO pushing closer to its boundaries. In the current conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, one question at the center of the conflict is Ukraine's ambition to join NATO, which Russia sees as an opportunity for NATO to move its military arsenals closer to the Russian Federation. And when you look at the entire interpretation concerning this equation, then you cannot avoid dragging on the thinking of Halford Mackinder as far as the strategic importance of East Europe is concerned. Also, German expansion in the Second World War, Adolf Hitler made substantive efforts in conquering East Europe, especially in the Operation Barbarossa, where he targeted to counter and to conquer the Russian Federation. And also the Soviet for the longest time of its existence, worked so hard to control Eastern Europe, which they felt was so significant in as far as the power projection in the line of the thinking of Halford Mackinder is concerned. And modern Russia security strategy also is informed by this lifelong theory of Halford Mackinder, where the Russian Federation has always viewed Eastern Europe as critical to its national security and trying to resist the expansion of NATO eastward reflects the Heartland style of geopolitical thinking, which of course is deeply anchored on the thinking of Halford Mackinder. And also the US presence in Eurasia, where the US has established the military bases in Central Asia and also trying to maintain its presence in Eurasia and prevent a major power from consolidating the heartland, also informs the American grand strategy as far as the region hegemons are concerned. And this thinking specifically falls into this theory by Halford Mackinder, the heartland. When you look at it keenly also, China's quest to build the Belt and the Road Initiative gravitates towards the thinking of Halford Mackinder, in which China has invested heavily in rail and infrastructure across Central Asia. This belt and road seeks to strengthen land connectivity to the sea and also across the Eurasia. And this kind of activities by China in trying to create its presence in Central Asia and subsequently connect to the Eurasia informs the actions of China, which again we can argue that they reflect the thinking of Halford Mackinder about the importance of the Eurasia. And the ensuing energy geopolitics also can be argued to reflect the broader thinking of Halford Mackinder and the Arctic strategy, the contest between the US and the Russian Federation and China over who will control the Greenland can easily be interpreted from the Heartland Theory by Halford Mackinder. And therefore, the Heartland Theory is very critical to the study of geopolitics because it has influenced the states to secure buffer zones and also expand alliances to Eastern Europe and also to compete to control the Eurasian land routes and prevent also the rise of the dominant continental superpower. And therefore we can argue that in the study of geopolitics, the Heartland Theory that was presented by Halford Mackinder in 1904 still remains one of the most important theoretical frameworks that we can use to explain the choices and the actions of those acting in the name of the state and also the state actions in a global politics that is largely described as anarchic and potentially chaotic, which is very conflictual and limited as much as cooperation is needed. For more geopolitical content from the Horn of Africa, East Africa, and Africa at large, hit the subscribe button and see you in the next one.